On to the second part of our event. And Michelle, please, as you all know by now, Sharon is our co-presenter. Nice to be here.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michelle Lavora, as Janina said, and I'm the Southeast Regional Director for Sharon. We appreciate that Vice Mayor Fernandez and the City of Miami Beach make women's health and wellness and education a priority in our community. October's Breast Cancer Month is here, and with it comes bright pink reminders of breast cancer's prevalence in our community. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. And for many, that risk is even higher due to family history or genetic mutations. 1 in 40 Jewish men and women are carriers of the BRCA gene mutation, leading to a significantly increased risk for breast and ovarian cancer, as well as prostate, pancreatic, melanoma, and men's breast cancer. Sharon has offices in the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, and the Western regions of the U.S., and most recently, we just launched in Israel. We have trained social workers supporting those facing the stressors of cancer with highly personalized and confidential, compassionate care. Our services are offered by phone and they're completely free of charge, including some financial subsidies that address non-medical needs. We have a peer support network which connects women one-on-one to others who share similar diagnosis or experience. We have a survivorship kit to provide individualized support and survivorship navigation, and a family-focused program that provides resources to caregivers and family members. We have genetics counselors that are available to answer questions and address concerns of women, men, and families who reach out to us for support. We offer materials, and for those facing ovarian cancer or who are at high risk of developing other cancers. During this month of pink, don't stop at awareness. Take the next steps toward action. Pick up the phone and schedule your screening if it's the right time for you. Ask your family about their cancer history and talk to a genetics counselor either at Sharon or your local hospital. We actually have one who's going to be here on the panel tonight, Talia Donnenberg from Sylvester. Consider genetics testing if it's right for you. Like Alex Fernandez had said earlier, that he received a positive mutation, BRCA1 or BRCA2, BRCA1 mutation, which causes him to now have increased surveillance and take other possible measures and know his family history. And more importantly, pay attention to your body. If something does not look or feel right, don't ignore it. Tonight you're here taking action to educate yourselves, and you're in for an excellent in-depth discussion with a panel of experts. Sharon is grateful to have partnerships with Baptist Health Miami Cancer Institute, University of Miami Sylvester Cancer, and of course H3, that allows us the opportunity to bring programs like this to the community. We're excited to be partnering, like Janina said, for the 3rd year in a row with our one-woman show from H3, Health, Hope, and Healing. Janina is a 20-year breast cancer survivor herself and has dedicated her life to advocacy, education, and community outreach. H3, Health, Hope, and Healing is more than a breast cancer nonprofit. It's a beacon of fun, hope, and support. H3 offers unique programs like open panel discussions, support groups and engaging podcasts, and empowers those affected by breast cancer to not just survive, but to thrive. H3 connects individuals with breast cancer with the resources and information they require to fight their battles. Their signature event is the annual open house panel discussion, and Janina has spearheaded 8 of these prior to this. She's going to tell you a little bit more about last year's, and I'm going to turn it over to her to moderate tonight's panel.
So I want to thank you all for being here today. special guest that came all the way from Fort Myers to be here in this 2 hours, an hour and a half discussion. Isn't that amazing? So I would like to introduce you, Judy Perkins, whose unique experience in immunotherapy treatment led her to the cure. In December 2015, Judy Perkins became the first metastatic breast cancer patient to be declared disease-free. Congratulations. And actually, you are so high-end that I'm going to take hours to describe your bio, your skills. So why don't you introduce yourself? Dr. Ferris, tell us what you do and who you are.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm Alejandro Perez. I'm a breast medical oncologist at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. I practice in Broward County, in Plantation. So I've been working with breast cancer for 25 years, seeing patients with breast cancer and also at high risk of developing breast cancer. Very involved in research, working very hard, trying to improve the quality of life of our patients and the cure rate, of course. Thank you.
So, coming from a few blocks from Betsy Hotel, Talia Dorenberg. Please, Mrs. Dorenberg, or should I call it Talia? Talia is fine, please.
I encourage everyone, including my patients, to call me Talia. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Sharp-Sherritt, and it's a pleasure to be able to represent Sharp-Sherritt as well as University of Miami. Very happy to be here, and my history in South Florida goes back about 30 years, and I have about almost 30 years in the field of cancer genetics. I trained in New York, but I moved down here because this is part of my community. I'm Jewish and Cuban, so this is kind of our homeland. I'm glad to be able to be people who understand the culture. I started the University of Miami Cancer Genetics program in 2000. So been here for a very, very long time, and I'm honored to say that we have now grown from one cancer to four of us, maybe almost five of us. So I was glad to be part of that increase, and every day we see not only patients affected by cancer, but their families. And cancer affects, I think, all families. And everybody has somebody they know in the family with cancer, including me. And I'm honored to work with them. The advances in human genetics have been really great in the last 30 years, and I'm happy to be here to share with you.
Simonette Lucas, and she's from Miami/Jamaica, and she likes to be called Simi.
Simi is easy for folks. Simonette is a little bit.
Can you speak more into the mic?
Sorry. Simi is easier for folks. Simi. Simonette is a little bit intimidating. 10 letters, it looks like it's more than it is. So we'll go with Simi. I was at Sylvester, but now I'm at Miami Cancer Institute, practice health cancer care. And I'm responsible for Office of Research Integrity. I have been working in cancer research since 2016, and research overall since I graduated college in 2003. And I'm 23 years old, by the way. Just for that. The math doesn't math, but yes, that's what it is. The girl math. And I'm happy to be here.
And Judy, I'm giving you the chance to introduce yourself, please.
So my name's Judy Perkins, and actually I was a patient at Sylvester Cancer Center. Dr. Charles Vogel was my oncologist, and I had stage 0 cancer back in 2003, and then stage 4 in 2013. And after Sylvester ran out of tricks for me, I got into a clinical trial at the NIH, and I was cured using my own T cells. That's the short story. And then I kind of became world famous for a little moment in time. So it was a crazy ride. So that's my story.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you for coming from so far away with such an open heart. So in the introduction of our 8th panel discussion, I want to reflect to our past meaningful discussions. Our first 3 discussions focus on the rise in cancer diagnosis, the vital role of education and prevention, and the importance of personal responsibility in navigating both conventional and alternative treatments. We highlighted the challenges patients face within the healthcare system, grounded in the belief that it begins with me. Next, we examined how the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted cancer diagnosis and treatment access with far-reaching consequences like diabetes, obesity, and mental illness among cancer survivors. In 2022, our focus shifted to genetic testing as a tool for diagnosis and treatment, especially in specific racial and ethnic groups, while addressing the needs of BRCA-positive patients. Last year, we shone, and Dr. Paris was present, we shone a light on disparities in breast cancer care for Black women, emphasizing the need of culturally competent health care, stronger communication, and targeted research. What an incredible journey. Since 2016, every year we have a panel discussion with a different topic. This year we are committed to advancing the conversation by exploring cutting-edge cancer treatment such as immunotherapy, clinical trials, and vaccines. Our focus is to share with the world the new possibilities of curing cancer through advanced treatment, and also offering hope for a brighter future in cancer care. So in the next, whatever time we have left, I will be moderating the panel discussion. You have 3 to 5 minutes to answer the questions, and then in the end we have 10 minutes for the audience to ask questions to the panel. So, on that note, let's go to the first question. Immunotherapy, Dr. Alejandra Perez. Can you explain the basic principles of immunotherapy and how it differs from traditional cancer treatment such as chemotherapy and radiation?
Yes, so cancer cells are tricky, they're sneaky. And as oncologists, we're always trying to see what's unique about that patient that we have in front of us, what's unique about that tumor. And that's probably that's been one of the biggest advances that I've seen in my lifetime for sure in cancer care, that we're learning more about how to treat a particular patient, what's unique about that patient. When I started in this field 25 years ago, we used to treat everybody the same. Everybody with a 1 centimeter tumor, breast cancer, had the same chemotherapy, had the same treatment, and that was it. That's all we knew. And again, in my lifetime, which if you look at the history of cancer, 25 years is nothing, I've seen a huge change in the way we approach cancer care. So when we have a patient in front of us, we of course have to see if it's early stage breast cancer, if it's advanced breast cancer, but what's unique about that tumor. And we start with the very basics. We start with the estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, HER2, and we look at genetic testing, and we look at next generation sequencing, so we analyze the genetic material of the tumor, we try to find what's unique about that patient. And we have alterations in the tumor, we have mutations, we have changes in the cancer cells. So for some patients, immunotherapy is appropriate, for some other patients, hormonal therapy is appropriate, for some other patients, they need chemotherapy, they need targeted therapy. So if you look at chemotherapy, chemotherapy is able to kill cancer cells, but of course also kills good cells. And that's the main issue we all have with chemotherapy. It doesn't discriminate, it goes and kills cells. And yes, the good cells are able to recover, and we hope to kill the cancer cells, making sure that they don't come back. That's chemotherapy. Hormonal therapy, we target the estrogen receptors. And if the patient is estrogen positive, so this tumor was stimulated by estrogen, let me take away estrogen, and that's a form of therapy. Targeted therapy goes only after the cancer cell. So we identify, for example, HER2. We identify the HER2 in that cell, and we send a therapy that is only going to kill the cancer cells. That's targeted therapy. Then we have immunotherapy, and we have more and more research and already approved drugs in breast cancer with immunotherapy, where we use our own immune system. We try to stimulate our own immune system to target, to kill those cancer cells, because our own immune system is able to kill cancer cells, and it does it all the time. But when we have cancer, when cancer is already developed, we try to stimulate the immune system to kill those cancer cells. So there are very different treatments. Radiation, you ask about radiation, is very localized to one area, and you give radiation to a particular, let's say the breast, or maybe a metastatic lesion in the bones, somewhere else, but it's very localized, and it works in a very different mechanism of action. So I think the important thing is to recognize what's special about that tumor, what's unique about that tumor, and give the therapy that is going to be the most appropriate for that patient.
Dr. Simi, immunotherapy can be expensive. What are the current challenges in making it accessible to a broader patient population? How can we ensure that advancements in immunotherapy are accessible to underserved populations and not just those with financial resources?
That is a tricky one. Sorry, that is a tricky one. So the NIH and the FDA are doing a lot of work to ensure that all different types of therapies are accessible to underserved. There are research studies depending on where you go from here. Unfortunately, Baptist Health is a payee hospital, and so you'll have to pay for Medicare or have Medicare or Medicaid. You have safety net hospitals, Jackson Hospital, where you can get care here in Miami-Dade, and that's also served by Sylvester oncologists and surgeons there who will provide care. But I think in general, as we move forward, with care here in America, it's going to take us lobbying and really wanting to make it accessible to folks. The FDA is doing work, the NIH is doing work, but I honestly think all of that work is truly not enough, because as we see, there are folks who will go bankrupt. Even if they have the funds, will go bankrupt fighting cancer. There are tons of families. I mean, I attended a conference that is for IRB members, and the IRB, for those of you who do not know, the IRB is the Institutional Review Board who reviews studies for subject safety prior to a participant being able to go on a clinical trial. And there was this meeting where, a physician came and spoke about the importance of getting studies approved in a timely manner so that patients who are waiting to go on these trials can get access to these treatments. However, he almost went bankrupt himself fighting cancer because the IRB didn't approve the study in time, then his T-cell count dropped, and then it was just a fight to try to qualify for that trial again, and he had to put his family up in Pittsburgh, in a hotel, because that was where the clinical trial was open. So all of these things prevent folks, even with funds, who have insurance, because sometimes insurance don't want to cover things. They provide a space for us to be insecure when it comes to care. And I think it's going to take a lot of us really lobbying to get a space where we can have access to care, insurance paying for things, care when we don't have insurance and that sort. And it's going to take a large amount of us to really do this work to get access to care.
Thank you. Talia, how has genetic testing shaped the development of new therapies like breast cancer vaccines and immunotherapy?
I got a cheat sheet, so sorry. Just to keep me on track. It's a big question. I think that genetic testing has definitely revolutionized certain types of cancer care. And I'm going to basically expand on the foundation that Dr. Perez gave us with respect to what kinds of therapies and for who and how do we identify people. So I want to make a distinction between genetic testing and genomic testing. So most cancer is sporadic. That means it happens by chance. And all cancer has genetic alterations. This happens from normal cells who, again, maybe escape the immune system and sustain mutations over time. So genetic testing can identify a small part of the population, about 10% of cancer of the breast is hereditary, means you inherit a genetic mutation, and we can now test for those mutations, not only BRCA1 and BRCA2. Those are surely the well-known genes, the best-known genes. We have the most information about those genes, but they are not the only players. And so we now have what we call next-generation sequencing techniques that can do sort of a shotgun approach. Not only decide on the gene that's likely in the family, and test that gene and then test another gene, but we can do a panel of genes. So we can identify various different inherited predispositions. Now, genomic testing looks at the tumor itself and is a little bit more sophisticated in that it can look at the whole genome of the tumor. So, but that is the distinction is that we're looking at tumor. So we're looking at a patient with cancer. With genetic testing, we're looking at healthy cells to determine predisposition. So, the biggest thing that came about with new technology is a tremendous decrease in cost of testing, which is great, which allows many more people to access this kind of testing. But given the complexity of the testing we have now, we have to be able to sift through that data. So we need software, tools to understand this immense amount of biological data that's sitting inside our cancer cells. But basically, getting back to genetics, getting back to hereditary cancer, hereditary cancers have been found to be particularly sensitive to immunotherapy. So depending on what gene is involved, certain things happen within the cell, the cancer cell. If you have a hereditary predisposition, you essentially have a lot more mutations in that cancer cell. So it gives you a lot more targets to to base your therapies on. So these cancers, they can protect themselves by stimulating things called immune checkpoint targets. And this helps the cancer cell escape detection. Now, the immune checkpoints, there are inhibitors, and they basically block these checkpoints and allow us to harness the immune system to target these kinds of cells. So, in hereditary cancer such as BRCA1, BRCA2, genes called PALB2, Lynch syndrome, there are now vaccines to not only treat the cancers, but to prevent cancers. So some of the preventive vaccines are very exciting, and they're also harnessing the immune system. So there are a couple of trials going on, one at Cleveland Clinic, which is looking at healthy patients with BRCA1 and PALB2 mutations. Why? Because those patients are specifically at risk for a certain type of breast cancer known as triple-negative breast cancer. And triple-negative breast cancers, for the trial in Cleveland Clinic, they actually present with a protein called alpha-lactalbumin on their cells. So they can make vaccines to trigger the immune system to recognize this particular protein and attack the cancer cell. Another place that's doing vaccines is Vassar Cancer Center, University of Pennsylvania. The wonderful scientists there who are using vaccines by stimulating the immune system to target certain enzymes involved in these hereditary cancers. These are things called telomerase, which are overactive in cancers. And by doing this, the vaccine is, again, to catch and destroy early cancer cells, or probably pre-malignant cells, by identifying these features. And by developing a response, immune response, researchers can catch cancers before they become malignant. So that's the hope. And I think that we have a lot of potential, and nothing is in a vacuum, so sometimes combination therapies are needed. So certain genes such as BRCA2, cancers for BRCA2 are being looked at now to not only use immunotherapy, but sometimes immunotherapy doesn't do it all, so combination therapies are being looked at. And I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Now we are going to the second round, and I would like to ask Judy a special question. Judy? With her unique experience in immunotherapy treatment that led her to the cure, I will ask, what was the original diagnosis? Explain your breast cancer treatment procedure in detail.
So, I originally had DCIS, which some of you may know is stage 0. I was told it was pre-cancer. Got a mastectomy 2 weeks later as it worked. Didn't think about cancer again for 10 years. 10 years later, it came back and it was stage 4. Came back on the same side, underneath my sternum, basically. It was ER positive, estrogen receptor positive, HER2 negative, went through all the standard treatments. The interesting thing about what actually worked for me, so if any of you haven't heard about the NIH, I hadn't heard about the NIH, I didn't know anything about the NIH. If any of you know people that need help, it is the largest clinical trial hospital in the country, in the world, not just for breast cancer, but for other things. So, I got the magic there. And so my particular treatment was, I was cured with immunotherapy using tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes. So what that means, lymphocytes are white blood cells. So there were white blood cells inside my tumor. So they took a little biopsy, got those white blood cells out of my tumor. They grew them, expanded them into an IV bag full of 90 billion cells, squished it back into me, and it ate up my cancer. Now, we were talking earlier about, how cancer is tricky. So the T cells were in there, but the cancer said, hey, nothing to see here, I'm self, there's nothing to fight. So that's how cancer is so tricky, as they were saying. So my particular adopted cell therapy is really trying to harness the immune system. And in my case, they did all the sequencing that these guys were talking about. I had 60 mutations between my tumor and my normal genetic, the gene they would get out of a red blood cell versus the tumor. So there were 60 targets, but only 3 of those were recognized by the T cells. And what the researchers told me, and they've published in their article, is that every patient that has had this success that I've had, it's been different. It's been a different target for every single patient, except I think they had 2 where they had the same thing. So it's just so darn tricky.
I have a second question for you, Judy. How was your experience participating in breast cancer clinical trials? How did it impact your treatment journey?
I was in 2 clinical trials, actually. I was in one at Sylvester Cancer Center. First one I was in was for an FGFR1 inhibitor. So FGFR is a fibroblast growth factor receptor. Basically, I had a lot of it in my cancer, so they targeted it with an inhibitor. Unfortunately, I then no longer had platelets, so even though my cancer went away, my platelets went away, and that was the problem with the FGFR1 inhibitors. And now you don't hear about them anymore because the side effects are horrible, and so it didn't work. Well, it worked, but nobody could take it. And then I got in my trial, and by the time I went there, I had it all through my liver. It was all over me. I didn't really think it was going to work. They told me there was a 10% chance. At that point, I was giving away my money. Once I'm giving away my money, I'm definitely letting go. And so I didn't think it was going to work, but I had nothing better to do. I couldn't really walk around the block anymore. I was in a lot of pain, and so I just hoped it would do something good for somebody. And I just, got lucky.
Thank you. So now we are going to the 3rd round, which is clinical trials. I would say that I have to talk about patient experience. Dr. Perez, what have been the experiences of patients undergoing immunotherapy, and how do this compare to your or their expectations?
So yes, I've been involved with breast cancer research for many years. At Sylvester right now we have 3 clinical trials with vaccines, different forms of immunotherapy. We have a study from the NCI that we do in collaboration with the NCI that is looking at patients with advanced breast cancer. We look at their tumor and we make a vaccine to target that tumor. So very specific for the tumor that that patient has. So we make the vaccine and we combine the vaccine with chemotherapy. It's a clinical trial. We have several patients on the study. Of course, waiting to see results. So far, patients are doing very well. We also have a clinical trial with immunotherapy with a vaccine for patients that have already completed HER2-positive treatment in the adjuvant setting, and we give this vaccine trying to prevent a recurrence. So you can have vaccines in both settings. You can have vaccines in early stage breast cancer and in advanced breast cancer. I think the experience changes completely. For you, it saved your life. I think participation in a clinical trial is so important because it gives us access to medications or vaccines or immunotherapy that is not going to be available to the patient today. That medication is going to be available to the patient in 5-10 years. And as you know, we don't have time to wait for 5-10 years when you're dealing with cancer. So I think participation in clinical trials is excellent for many reasons. One, we have access to drugs that are not going to be available to us if we don't participate in the clinical trial. Second, we of course we're doing something for the community, for our breast cancer sisters, and so you do so much. But it's also important for clinical trials that we are all represented, and that's so important in the disparities that we see in cancer care. Because when you look at the clinical trials, most of the patients that participate in clinical trials are Caucasians, they're white Caucasians, and so that's 80-90% of the patients that participate in studies. So Hispanics like me or African Americans, we are not well represented in these studies. So it's also as part of the experience that you're describing. We try to get to our communities, to these communities, to really explain the importance of us participating in those clinical trials, because otherwise we're not going to know. It's not the same. We're all different, and it's not the same. We're not going to know how a particular medication is gonna have an effect on somebody that is African American compared to a Caucasian, compared to a Hispanic. We see very different outcomes or toxicities. So it's important. Representation is important in clinical trials. Also, the other advantage that I see is that when you participate in a clinical trial, you're being supervised by a huge team of people. It's not just your medical oncologist in the office taking care of you. We are being monitored by hundreds of people behind the scenes, making sure we're doing everything by the book, everything perfect, no deviations in the clinical trial. So there's so many advantages participating in a clinical trial, not to mention that that's the only way we're going to find a cure for 100% of women or men with this disease. Patients ask all the time, when are you going to find the cure? And we have the cure. We have the cure for many women. We're curing 90% of women that present to us with early stage breast cancer, but we're not curing 100%. And that's why the work continues, and we're here to continue with all the research, everything that we do every day, these meetings, education to the community, outreach, philanthropy, all the things that we do in order to get the community involved, because we could not do it alone. And we're not going to rest until we're able to cure 100% of women with this disease, or even better, prevent the disease altogether.
Thank you. Yes, a little bit tough when you talk about cancer. You know, as you see, a lot of people laugh when you start to talk about in depth what is real cancer. You know, so I keep trying, I keep doing it. So we always have someone that will listen to us, right? So now let me ask you a question, Simi, or Dr. Lucas, Miss Lucas. Why is it important for minorities to participate in clinical research so that they can benefit from the advancement of treatments for breast cancer?
I think Dr. Perez touched on that so very well. She said a lot of things inclusive of toxicity patterns, how the drug works, the pharmacogenetics of it all. It may not, I mean, right now, as she said, most of the people who participate in clinical trials are Caucasians. And this happened in the United States for a number of reasons. We go back to the Tuskegee of it all. We go back to Henrietta Lacks, where she presented to Johns Hopkins. Her cells are living and creating drugs up to this day. Her family, she didn't know about it. Her family didn't know about it. We go back to folks in Latin America who finally, I think President Obama finally apologized for harming. We go back to the American Indians who have been harmed in clinical trials because there was no oversight. So I think that is why a lot of folks are very hesitant to participate in clinical trials. However, this is a new day. And I educate patients a lot about something called the Belmont Report. And it goes back to respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. Just 3 simple basic principles. And respect for persons is informing people, so it goes to the informed consent of it all, which is the contract that a patient would go enter into with whomever they're participating in a clinical trial with from the day they're asked to participate in this clinical trial, because they're not invited, it's not a party. So if you read an informed consent and it says you are being invited to participate, say no, I'm being asked, because it's not a party. So from that moment until they are done with that clinical trial, there's the informed consent process that happens. Any new information that would affect the person's willingness to participate in the clinical trial should be divulged to them, and is the institutional review board ensures that that happens. There's compliance that is watching over us all. Beneficence, which is truly making sure that the risk-benefit ratio is equitable across. It's not Susie Q is participating in this research and she's taking all the risks, and there is no risks on the other side. She's not getting any benefits, there's benefits on the other side. No. The informed consent will specify what the risks and the benefits are while participating in a clinical trial. So one of the things I do when I do community outreach is to inform folks that look like me. I'm part Cuban, and I'm part, I guess, African, but not American, because I'm American by naturalization. So, I don't know, I guess I could be African American now. But folks that look like me, black and brown folks, to let them know, yes, you need to participate in a clinical trial because things that may be efficacious in one group may not be as so for you. Or body metabolizes things differently. So we really need to participate in clinical trials so that when we say this drug works in humans, it truly does. And it's not just Caucasian women, right, who are participating in these clinical trials, or men, I should say as well. So that's why diversity and inclusion is truly important. And I need to go back to the Belmont Report of Justice, because justice ensures that folks are no longer being harmed in these clinical trials. Again, Dr. Perez says there's several layers, there's hundreds of people. If you participate in a clinical trial by pharma is reviewing it. The FDA is reviewing it. The institutional board at that site is reviewing it. A larger institutional board across whoever's the IRB of record for the entire trial, for if it's a multi-center trial, is reviewing it. So there's so many layers to protect our patients these days that it is worth it for us to be able to have a say to say, okay, this works in all these individuals, it truly does work because we're all participating. And I think it is through education that we're going to get there, because I think a lot of people are going back to, no, the government is trying to harm me. And also, with social media, there's a lot of propaganda, and even smart people fall victim to this. I can say my best friend is an amazing person, she's super smart, and she'll be like, you know, I heard that acai is good for this type of cancer. Let me send you this doctor who said that the pharma company shut him down because he had this study that was going to do this amazing things with acai, and because they want to, you know, promote their clinical trials and they want to charge us for drugs, they don't want us to use acai. I'm like, okay. So again, it's all through education that we're going to get there. And us, you know, when we have folks that we hear of, whether it's in our families or friends, we educate them and point them in the direction of the right information and say, you know, not because it's on social media means it's true.
patients are good candidates for immunotherapy and vaccine? Are there specific biomarkers or genetic factors involved?
So I feel like I'm getting all the
All the hard
technical
questions.
questions. I wonder why.
You're the counselor.
You're the counselor.
So first of all, I want to say that I'm not involved in cancer treatment. And I would prefer every patient to talk to their oncologist because all of these biomarkers and genetic markers are things that they test for and that they can advise and they can tell you which ones they think are necessary to target your treatment. But some of them are getting very well known. So for immunotherapy, things called PD-L1 are receptors that can be targeted, and these respond to checkpoint inhibitors, so essentially immunotherapy. And these checkpoint inhibitors can be used on a variety of different cancers. Now, your oncologist will tell you, what types of cancers. Also, what we've been getting to all of this time, or what I've been getting to, are things that are specific to inherited cancers, but not exclusive to inherited cancers. So a lot of these features are not exclusive to inherited cancers, but they're called tumor mutation burden, which means that a greater number of mutations occur in the tumors. And it can make it more recognizable to the immune system. What happens also is something called microsatellite instability. And this can all be tested for by literally one test, which is the tumor genomics, which you should ask your doctor about. And it's up to them to decide really when is the appropriate time.
But do the doctors offer?
Yes, yes, a
Okay.
lot of this is standard of care. Not only that, but testing tumors with genomic testing and matched with normal, which is what Judy was talking about, right? In some hospitals, that's being done on every single cancer patient, is matching tumor testing to normal so that you can distinguish what are the mutations in the tumor and what are the mutations that are inherited and what are the appropriate therapies. So just a few more things based on that. All of these things like microsatellite instability and tumor mutation burden, what happens is that the cancers have these mutations, and because of these mutations, they form these things called neoantigens. And neoantigens can be specific to not only that person's cancer, but to the types of cancer. So let's say they can be specific to BRCA1 related breast cancer or PALB2 related breast cancer. And so finding those neoantigens can be targetable. Not necessarily having to use a lot of money and determine for only that person's tumor, but for anybody who has BRCA related tumors. There are specific neoantigens that recur and that we can say, okay, let's look at these immunoantigens in this subtype of cancer patients, or this immunoantigen, so they can be very specific. And that's where, again, the technology is exploding. Also, gene expression profiles, we can now look at RNA expression, which helps tell us how genes make proteins and how these proteins interact with each other. So I think that the partnership between the patient getting educated to know what is available and talking to their oncologist to get the ideas of when and how it's useful to them are some of the most important things. And genetic counselors can help in that respect, but we stop at the treatment. So we know about them, we can help educate you, but we would, certainly work within the team with your oncologist.
Thank you. I have a bonus question, and I think I will ask Dr. Perez, or if somebody else wanna come in as well. What are the most significant advancements in breast cancer treatment that have emerged from clinical trials involving immunotherapy and cancer vaccines, and how have this trial shaped current treatment protocols?
So to me, the biggest advancement in breast cancer that I've seen, of course, knowing what HER2 is was a huge advancement in breast cancer. Knowing medications like trastuzumab or Herceptin, that changed the way we treat patients, and we cure so many more. But I think the concept of personalized medicine, precision medicine, is really the way of the future, and that involves all of these treatments that we're talking about. And you all know what a tumor board is. Tumor board is all hospitals have a tumor board where doctors get together and they meet and they discuss your case and they give recommendations. Nowadays, at Sylvester, we have a molecular tumor board. So that takes us one step further. Molecular tumor board is all of these scientists, they get together, they don't treat the patient, they're in the lab. But they get together, they analyze the genetic material of the tumor, and they give us recommendations to us, the clinicians that are in clinic with you. We have molecular tumor boards. They look at all of these genetic alterations, all of these markers that I was talking about, all of these things, and they give us recommendations. So I get a full report from all of these brilliant minds that are in the lab. They don't see patients, but they give us a report and they tell us this patient has a good chance of responding to X, Y, and Z. And for what reason? Because they have this marker, they have that marker. So I think, to me, personalized medicine or precision medicine is really one of the most important advancements in breast cancer that I've seen in my lifetime. In terms of immunotherapy, what we've seen, for example, in breast cancer with triple-negative breast cancer, not just in the metastatic setting, but also in early-stage breast cancer, patients that we treat before surgery with chemotherapy. Now we know that adding immunotherapy to the management of that patient, we increase the chances of the cancer going away completely. By the time we do surgery, we don't find cancer anymore. So those are huge advancements. And vaccines, just trying to decrease the risk of recurrence for our patients, or even in patients that have metastatic breast cancer. How can we control the disease with a vaccine that technically is going to be less toxic than chemotherapy? So there are so many areas that we're working on in cancer care that it's just overwhelming to see how many options the patients have. And sometimes those discussions, when you have a patient in front of you, they become so complicated because there are many options and they're very good options. And this is really how we're moving the field forward with all the research that we're doing.
Thank you. We have a final question to all panelists, and then we're going to move on to the questions from the audience. So I will start with Judy. What are your hopes and expectations for the future of cancer care? And how do you envision the role of immunotherapy, clinical trials, and vaccines in shaping the future?
I was treated 9 years ago, so I really thought, I was just, that the dam was gonna break behind me. So I'm really disappointed that I'm still being talked about. There should be many, many more people being talked about. That said, the immune system, just cracking it, the magic, each little interaction, cytokine signaling, and the communication between the cancer and the immune system to fight, to not fight, to stand down, to, go to war. If we can ever figure that out and harness our innate ability to kill the cancer cells, I still think that is the right door to be knocking on. But I think personalized medicine you were speaking about is definitely the way to go. So I just hope they find it and the technology keeps advancing and the amazing lab, the people who are working in the lab and all the kind of technology they're working with is pretty fantastic. I'm on the NCI-IRB myself as a patient advocate, so I see all these clinical trials coming online every week, and I just keep wondering why isn't there more progress more quickly? But cancer's a tough one. It's just really coming.
So I'm looking for the day I'm out of a job. That's what I'm looking for. I've been treating cancer for many years, and I'm really looking for the day that I don't have to treat cancer anymore. And that's why a lot of what I'm doing right now, working on right now, is on prevention. Trying to look at pre-vivors, so patients that do not have breast cancer, but they're at high risk of developing breast cancer for whatever reason. Looking at pre-vivors and see what can we do to prevent cancer on those patients to decrease the risk. That is what I'm looking forward to. The day that I don't have to go to work anymore because there's no cancer in the world. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be my lifetime, probably not, because as you're saying, it's just a complicated disease. There's so many pathways in a cancer cell that just targeting all of them, it becomes such a huge job for us. But I think we need to do more in prevention. That's what I'm focusing on right now. More on prevention, how to decrease the risk, lifestyle changes, what else can we do? Not just with medications, but all things that we can do to really eliminate that word from our vocabulary. Thank you.
Any question?
Okay, no, it's,
Thank you.
what are your hopes and expectations for the future of cancer care, and how do you envision the role of immunotherapy, clinical trials, and vaccines in shaping the future?
Well, yes, my hopes are very similar to Dr. Perez's hopes and I think Judy's hopes.
So you're gonna be unemployed?
Yes.
Well,
That would be
no,
amazing.
I maybe won't be unemployed because I think that genetic testing should be available for everybody. And we used to do pre-test counseling. We used to do very extensive pre-test counseling where we would look at the family history and base a lot of our recommendations on the family history. And then we started doing genetic testing that was not specific to the family history, that was just sort of pan-cancer predisposition testing, and started finding individuals with changes in genes, alterations that were inherited that were not explained by their family history. And that causes us to shift and say, well, this is an incidental finding, but maybe it's significant. And so I think hopefully my job is safe in that I'm looking to identify people at higher risk that can take advantage of these prevention options. And I think that's my hope.
Thank you.
So I share the same sentiment as everyone on the panel. I hope that the IRB, that at MCI or other IRBs and other compliance offices, we are focusing on prevention trials and not we are, or it's an emergency, single patient IND, 9-year-old dying, that sort of thing, My hope is that we get to a space where we are looking at a lot of prevention, and I think it all goes back to, again, lobbying here in the United States, making sure. I know most of you travel, you go to Europe and you eat and you feel so well and you don't gain weight and then you come home and you eat the same amount of food and you wake up, you go on the scale and you're 3 pounds heavier. You're like, what is happening? It's our food. So as Dr. Perez says, doing the things, the preventive things, like eating food, real food, and not the processed food. So fruits and vegetables and meat. As healthy meat as you can get. Or a healthy protein, or meat protein, or well, I'm a meat, Jamaican oxtail, or sorry, can't cut that. But so again, living within our lifestyle, eating as healthy as we can, coming from our ethnic groups. I'm going to eat the oxtail, I'm going to eat the curry goat, but I also eat the curry goat and oxtail with lots of fruits and vegetables, and swapping out my rice. I do quinoa and peas, quinoa and peas instead of rice and peas. So changing some of those things and moving our bodies. Or lifestyle is get in a car, drive here, sit for an amount of time. Again, get back in our car, drive and sit, and then lay in our beds. So not so much movement. So I would encourage people to get up and move. I actually don't sit all day. I have a standing desk because I work from home. And I walk my walking pad all day long. If I go to a meeting and somebody sees me not walking, they're like, why are you not walking? It's because my pad stopped. But, I look forward to when we're focusing on really, truly prevention. And I think it is only going to be through education and getting people mobilized and involved. So exactly what you are doing, educating folks, having these panels so we can engage our communities and get people listening.
Michelle, say something.
Thank you, everybody. I know this ran a little bit over tonight, but this was great information. Yes, I think Janina went above and beyond in gathering this panel together. So thank you to all of you, to Sylvester Cancer Center, to Miami Cancer Institute, to the City of Miami Beach, to all of you here tonight. Thank you for your sharing your story with us. You are someone that we should, yes. Beautiful story, so thank you for being here tonight. Please take a gift bag. There's some valuable information. There's some gifts from our partners,
And there's food
Sylvester
left if you are hungry.
and Baptist. There's some food left, so please don't rush off. Thank you.
I want to say something. So I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you for coming here tonight, and to you, for especially you two girls from far away, to share your knowledge, your expertise to all of this beautiful audience. You have to understand that we stand together in support of those facing cancer and the challenges that it comes to their therapy. So on behalf of H3 and Sharsharet, we wish you all a safe and wonderful evening. And please remember, we are here to help anyone that goes through cancer. We just launched a program, which is the Big Ribbon Support Program. So if you know someone that just got diagnosed with cancer, remember H3 is here to help. Thank you so much.